Chapter 36. This trial was no longer just about Rachael Brown. It had become something more like a reckoning, a confrontation between justice and the failures of society. She was not simply on trial for taking a life. She had become the voice of every girl, every boy, every man or woman who had been trafficked, abused, and discarded. She was standing in the dock for those who had never been given the chance to stand at all. The news cycle was vicious. Commentators, legal analysts, psychologists, and politicians filled the airwaves, each debating the true meaning of justice in Rachael's case. Was her past responsible for her actions? Were the true perpetrators not the very individuals who groomed, manipulated, and ultimately sold her? On the 9 o'clock news on ITV, an impassioned debate unfolded. Inside Rachael's wing, the women huddled around the television screen and watched as the world dissected the woman they now viewed as both friend and survivor. A grave-faced male anchor turned to the panel of experts. "Is her trauma an excuse for her actions?" he asked, his voice steady but pointed. "Or should we hold her accountable as we would anyone else?" The debate seemed balanced until Lola Whitfield, a member of the panel because of her role at the Daily Morning Standard, cut through the discussion. Yes, she was trafficked. She turned to her left. Yes, she was pimped. She exhaled sharply, facing the camera. But let's not forget that she still raised her hand against an innocent man. That, she emphasized, is why she is on trial. The newsroom fell silent. In the prison's common room, the women shifted uneasily. Some clenched their fists, others remained deathly still. Lola pressed on. The camera zoomed in as her voice sharpened. If every trafficked girl goes on a killing spree, where does that leave the rest of us? Do we excuse bloodshed because of a troubled past? Justice cannot falter in the face of sympathy. Her words set fire to the airwaves. Don't get me wrong, I feel sympathy for her. But what about Edward? Who feels sympathy for him? Will he get justice? She wrinkled her nose. The facility erupted into argument. Some women shouted at the screen, furious at the indifference. Others looked haunted, seeing pieces of their own stories reflected in Rachael's trial. For every trafficked girl who had never escaped, for every woman shattered under the weight of violence, for every soul failed by the systems that should have protected them, Rachael's trial was their trial too. A battle not just for Rachael's freedom, but for recognition, for justice. Beyond the prison walls, social media did what social media does best. Everyone had an opinion. The world had split in two. One side condemned Rachael as a killer. The other saw her as the ultimate victim of a society that had abandoned her long before she lifted that knife. The next day, Emmanuel arrived early at court. It was his usual routine whenever he was due to deliver a closing statement. The stillness of the empty courtroom helped him gather his thoughts, sharpen his focus, and silence the noise of doubt. He sat alone at the counsel table and stared at his notes, thinking not of strategy or rhetoric, but of Edward, the man who had trusted him with more than a case. He had trusted him with Rachael's life. Emmanuel had promised to fight for her, to give her the best defense the law could offer. That promise weighed heavily now, more than ever. He thought about Rachael, how she had crumbled slowly and silently under the pressure of it all, how the system seemed to sharpen its claws for people like her, people whose pasts were messy, whose stories did not fit neat legal boxes. This was his last chance. One final opportunity to appeal to the 12 strangers who now held her fate in their hands. One more shot at piercing through their assumptions, their biases, and the headlines that had already tried and convicted her in the court of public opinion. The courtroom soon filled with its usual mix, press with their notepads, spectators craning their necks, hungry for drama, and court officers moving with quiet urgency. Rachael sat beside Emmanuel without a word, pale and hollow-eyed. Her movements were sluggish, her frame noticeably thinner. Across the room, the stenographer poised her fingers over the keys, ready. A hush settled as Judge Olam took his seat. His presence shifted the air. In that moment, he was the embodiment of the law, and Emmanuel felt that familiar tug inside him, the reminder that he stood before a force greater than himself. The jury looked on, weary yet alert, the weight of the past days etched into their expressions. They had heard everything, the evidence, the testimonies, the emotion. Now they waited for this last stroke before retiring for deliberations. Emmanuel glanced at Rachael. Her shoulders were hunched, her fingers worrying the edge of her sleeve. Tears glimmered, though she fought them back. The loss of Edward had not eased, it had deepened, rooting itself further into her soul, and the verdict terrified her. He drew in a breath. This was it. He rose slowly, buttoned his jacket, and stepped into the center of the courtroom. As he prepared to speak, his eyes moved once more to Rachael. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the case before you today is extraordinary. This is not just the trial of Rachael Brown, it is an examination of a life shaped by unimaginable suffering, a life that has endured more pain than most of us could ever fathom. He let his words settle. This case demands more than a simple verdict. It requires you to ask a deeper question. Did Rachael Brown truly act with intention, or was she reacting to the culmination of years of torment, fear, and abuse? He paced slightly, then faced the 12 jurors, shutting out the rest of the courtroom. Did Rachael Brown intend to kill her partner, the same man she married days after the incident, the same man whose child she carries? He let the question linger before answering. No, she did not intend to cause Edward any harm. Emmanuel's voice softened. Rachael loved her husband. That is not a defense tactic. That is an undeniable truth. Edward Hale saved her. He gave her a future. He was her best friend, her anchor in a world that had never given her a reason to trust before. He even married her after the incident. His voice hardened slightly. So I ask you again, why would she deliberately kill the man who gave her a second chance at life? What is the motivation? A pause. There is none. 12 pairs of eyes stared back at him. She did not intend the knife for him. There is no evidence of motive. This was a tragic mistake. She was fighting her past, those demons, those words. I will come back for you if you ever leave us. That threat never left her. She believed she was defending herself from an intruder. The courtroom was silent. One could hear a pin drop. Rachael's trauma did not end the night she escaped her captors. It followed her. It lurked in the shadows, distorted reality, poisoned her sense of safety. When Edward moved suddenly, Rachael's mind did not see the man she loved. It saw a monster from her past. He turned fully to the jury, his voice now a plea. So I ask you, can we hold someone fully responsible for an action born from years of unspeakable suffering? Is that justice? If you find Rachael Brown guilty, you do not punish a killer, you punish a victim. He paused, then added, voice low but fierce. Find Rachael Brown not guilty, because she is not guilty. She is a victim of a past that came back to claim her, and we do not condemn victims, we give them mercy. He returned to his seat and placed a gentle hand on Rachael's trembling hands. The defense rested. Gerald rose slowly, gathering the room's attention. This was his moment to finally bring justice for Edward Hale and honor the promise he had made to those who demanded it. The courtroom fell silent as he stepped forward. His footsteps echoed against the floor, the only sound in the room. He paused, scanning the 12 jurors who held Rachael Brown's fate in their hands. "We have heard a tragic story," he began. "A story of pain, a story of hardship, a story of survival. But today, we are not here to judge Rachael Brown's past." He stepped closer to the jury box, resting his hands on the barrier. "You are here to judge her actions." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Gerald remained still. "We acknowledge her past," he continued, his voice briefly softening. "We do not diminish her suffering. No one is denying that Rachael Brown has endured hardship, but hardship does not erase responsibility. Pain does not justify killing a human being. Trauma does not grant you the right to take a life, a precious life." Gerald turned back to the jury, letting his gaze rest on each of them in turn. The silence deepened, thick with expectation. "She did not freeze in fear that night," he began, his voice steady. "She did not collapse. She did not try to run. No, she acted." Rachael shifted in her seat, pulling her hands tighter into her lap. Emmanuel did not move. Gerald continued, pacing slowly before the jury box. "She picked up a knife. She gripped it tightly. She drove it into the victim's body. And when he fell to the floor, bleeding out, she did not call 999. A murmur rippled through the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge's warning glance. Gerald's eyes narrowed. Instead, she stood there. She watched. As the life drained from Edward Hale's body, she did nothing. He tilted his head slightly. "Why? Fear?" He gave a slow, dismissive shake of the head. "If she was afraid, why didn't she run? Why didn't she lock herself in a room? Why didn't she pick up the phone and call the police? Because she knew exactly what she had done. And now you must decide what to do about it." He strode toward the defense table, his shoes striking sharply against the floor. Rachael didn't look at him. She sat, motionless, her fingers interlaced so tightly they blanched. Gerald pointed toward her, his voice rising. "Edward Hale is dead. A mother has lost her son. A sister has lost her brother. A family is shattered. An organization is without its leader. This was not self-defense. It was not an accident. She raised her hand against him. Think about that. She attacked him with that knife. And that is all that matters. Domestic violence, plain and simple." The gallery stirred with soft gasps, shifting feet, a cough quickly stifled. Gerald stepped forward again, his voice resonant. "We live in a society governed by law, by order, by justice. If we allow excuses to override facts, we fail in our duty. If we let sympathy cloud judgment, we set a dangerous precedent. If we excuse this crime, where do we draw the line? If every person who has suffered hardship is absolved, where does it end?" He faced the jury again, eyes blazing. "Do we excuse every crime committed by someone with a tragic past? No. Rachael Brown caused this. Her hands took a life, and for that, she must be held accountable. You, the jury, have been entrusted with the responsibility to uphold justice. That is your duty. You do not owe Rachael Brown your pity." He glanced toward Catherine and Charlotte in the gallery. Catherine's eyes were red, her fingers twisted around a damp tissue. Charlotte sat rigid, pale and hollow. "You owe Edward Hale, his family and society the justice they deserve, and justice demands that his killer does not walk free. Find Rachael Brown guilty." Gerald held the jury's gaze for a long, weighty moment, the courtroom suspended in stunned silence. Only then did he turn and walk back to his seat, his expression cold, confident, utterly self-satisfied. He had done his job. And whatever strength Rachael had been clinging to felt crushed beneath the weight of his words. Judge Onam adjusted his glasses and looked toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his gaze sweeping over the 12 faces before him. You have heard the arguments, the testimonies, and the evidence presented in this case. It is now your solemn duty to deliberate and reach a verdict. Your task is not an easy one. The responsibility you bear is significant. You are not here to judge the entirety of Rachael Brown's life. You are here to determine one thing, and one thing only: her actions on the night that led to Edward Hale's death. His tone sharpened slightly. The word willfully, as used in these directions, means that an act was committed voluntarily and deliberately, with the specific intent to do something the law forbids. That is the standard you must consider. Your verdict must be unanimous. You must all agree on each charge against the defendant. Your deliberations will remain confidential, and you will never be required to explain your reasoning outside this court. It is your duty to consult with one another and to deliberate honestly and impartially. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but only after discussing the evidence with your fellow jurors. Do not hesitate to re-examine your views or to change your opinion if you become convinced you are wrong. A brief pause. However, he added, raising a hand slightly, do not surrender your honest convictions simply to reach a verdict or because others disagree with you. Remember, at all times, you are judges of the facts. Your sole objective is to determine whether the prosecution has proved beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged. You may now retire to deliberate. Rachael clasped her hands together and pressed them against her swollen belly. Her baby. His father was gone, and now she might be taken away too. She blinked back tears. The next time the jury entered that courtroom, her fate would be sealed. The jurors, a mosaic of men and women from different lives, now bound by a single responsibility, rose and filed silently out of the courtroom. As the door swung shut behind them, a hollow silence settled over the room. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Romans 3:14.